Some people will tell you that it was the Nintendo 64 that turned system launches into legitimate major events despite only consisting of two rather average games. Although I wasn't old enough, wealthy enough, or crazy enough to take part in the fall 1996 party that was the N64 launch, I still feel system launches didn't become what we know them as today until the PlayStation 2 arrived on October 26, 2000. This launch had some enormous hype going in that the active and frankly amazing Sega Dreamcast still managed to get caught in the undertow. From my perspective, however, you have to go all the way back to March of 2000 to catch the start of the PlayStation 2 launch experience. Not only was it the Japanese launch of the system, it's also right around that time that pre-orders started opening up in the West. I pre-ordered my console as quickly as possible, getting the 5th spot on the list at my local KB Toys, and feeling rather comfortable with that spot at the time. Even that early, I began trying to put a launch plan together, what games I would buy specifically. In hindsight, it was a pretty outlandish list, if only because I actually believed the then Ninja Gaiden 4 would actually make it, which in my defense actually was on the launch list for a time before descending into development hell and re-emerging as an Xbox exclusive. There were plenty of titles within reason as well. Tekken Tag Tournament, Sylphied the Lost Planet, NHL 2001, Ridge Racer 5, and Dead or Alive 2 Hardcore all got launch day consideration from me. I even held out just a little hope that maybe, just maybe, Street Fighter EX3 would be worth the disc it was printed on. The ensuing summer was not a pleasant one. Rumors of a North American PS2 launch shortage made fast work of the anticipation brought on by the intended launch lineup, and word of incidents that took place during the Japanese launch induced an overwhelming sense of paranoia. Having found work at the now-defunct Game Addicts Network since the Dreamcast launch, my new status as media left me completely unshielded from every ugly, frightening detail. If a generally well-behaved Japanese gaming community would go this crazy, what could I expect from my decidedly more, we'll call them lively, countrymen? Sure, I pretty much had the system locked down. After all, even with a shortage, what major retailer would get less than 10 to 12 units, right? But would that potentially get me shot on my way home in October? Still, a stupid little case of brain-scrambling paranoia wouldn't keep me from being excited for Sony's sophomore effort in the console market. As with the Dreamcast, I found my ways of building my own excitement on my own terms that came mostly in the form of screenshots of my anticipated games, but I would also eventually go the print magazine route again, in the form of EGM's PlayStation 2 launch special. Though not nearly as comprehensive as Dreamcast magazine's premiere issue the year prior, and justifiably so as a multi-platform publication, EGM put out a hell of a nice launch preview. I was disappointed that Ninja Gaiden 4 had gone AWOL, but I was still beyond pumped for just about everything else. Then things started going legitimately wrong. Talk of critical shortages, including an anemic shipment of about 500,000 consoles for a launch where the demand would easily be in excess of 2 million, and the even crazier shortage of only one memory card per 4 PS2s was terrifying. I quickly got on the phone with KB Toys asking about my pre-order status, and the good news was that the store was allocated 6 units, so I was still good to go there. The bad news was that KB was going to price gouge its allocation and said PS2 was going to cost me not $299, but $349. There goes one game. The impending launch took an interesting turn when I looked at the actual release timetable at Fun Unlimited. Apparently some games were going to hit store shelves well in advance of the system itself, by up to 2 weeks. I wouldn't have traded those 2 trips uptown for much of anything. The first of these trips was a late-night run out to Fun Unlimited for my first PS2 game, SSX. It wasn't on my radar, but I was still actually marginally impressionable to reviews at the time, and I already liked snowboarding games thanks to Cool Borders 3. I had to have it. The second was the most fruitful. I went out to Walmart a few days after picking up SSX and pulled down 2 big finds that had just been placed on the shelves: Tekken Tag Tournament and a memory card. I always go back to that one experience anytime I play Tekken Tag Tournament to this day. I had walked out of Walmart. The sky was completely overcast on a late afternoon in mid-October. I had a reportedly shorted game and an apparently scarce-as-hell memory card, and I could not wipe the grin off my face as I made my way through the back alley, crossed the street, and dashed toward the mall's bus stop. The most important items on my list had been checked off with 2 weeks to spare. By the time October 26th actually rolled around, I was a mess. My EGM issue looked like it had gotten regular reading not for a few mere weeks, but for a few years. During the 2-week lapse between my Walmart run and launch day, I just admired my 2 PS2 games with their lovely blue CDs, those nice DVD cases which were new to me at the time, and my memory card. It drove me nuts. Thankfully, unlike the Dreamcast, I did manage to get some sleep the night before. Meanwhile, across the street at the mall, a crowd was starting to accumulate outside of Walmart. Since Walmart never took pre-orders, system camping became sort of a launch day tradition that got off to a rocky start with the PS2, but I'll get to that in a moment. I woke up at a rather comfortable time in relation to KB opening 4 hours early at 6 a.m., and quickly got out to the bus stop, making it to the mall at 5:40 a.m. or so. There were surprisingly few people there, probably due to KB's excellent handling of the launch, price gouging aside, keeping their customers informed. There was no way to get bumped down the list without being a no-show. So if you were high enough on the list and you were there, it was a foregone conclusion that you would walk out of the Cache Valley Mall with a PlayStation 2. To this day, that's a lesson retailers could learn about carrying out launches. As it turned out, my 5th place spot guaranteed me a PlayStation 2 because KB was given a shipment of 6 units. Far less than I would have expected, but enough to clinch my own system, which was all I cared about. There were actually 2 no-shows ahead of me, which I assume was because of campers at other stores covering their asses, so I moved up to 3rd. Even though that only left 2 people ahead of me, the process was painfully long as it was, with each buyer going into the store individually to handle their purchases. When it was finally my turn, I went in to claim my PS2 with all the money I had left. Counting my deposit, I had roughly $425 to work with, which was enough to pull down a PS2 at the demand-induced $349.99 price tag, or as I like to call it, CSRP, Corporate Suggested Retail Price, along with a copy of NHL 2001. Forget a second controller, by the time KB's pricing was done with me, I didn't even have enough left for so much as dinner. They didn't even hug me on the way out. I had the oh-so-wonderful luck of catching the bus headed away from the transit center, which meant I had to ride the full route before it would swing back around and head toward my place. Not only that, the timing had me getting on a bus full of middle school kids. So here I am, morning of October 26, 2000. I'm on a bus with a bunch of kids carrying the one thing in the world every last one of them wants at the moment. Needless to say, that was uncomfortable. I had the PS2 connected almost immediately upon getting home, and I went right for Tekken Tag Tournament. That kicked off a highly enjoyable day of gaming across all 3 of my launch day picks, and I grew increasingly grateful throughout the day as I started hearing about what kind of uproar the launch caused not only in my hometown but across the country. My apprehension going into the launch was justified when news reports even started surfacing about parking lot robberies, including an incident that would see a car pulling up next to some kid and the passenger opened the door and snatched said child's PS2 before he even knew what hit him. Granted, I seem to recall that such incidents were in cities much larger than Logan, Utah, but I am and will forever be the play it safe type. On the more comical side of things, I was thankful I pre-ordered when I heard from one of my friends who were at Walmart. Apparently, that store's shipment was held up in the Midwest somewhere and wouldn't be arriving in Logan until that weekend. People stayed out on a rather cold night outside of Walmart, and at the time, not even one of those 24/7 supercenters, although it would become one within the year, stay tuned for the GameCube launch video, only to find that they'd have to do it all over again a couple nights later. Pre-orders win, life is good. In the following week, I began a new launch tradition for myself, that of trading in a number of older games to get a good starting library for the new system. And this time around, it really felt like redemption after I sacrificed some pretty good games for drivel like Mortal Kombat Gold and Trick Style in the wake of the Dreamcast launch the year before. The aforementioned games, along with some other dust magnets, ended up getting traded in, and taking their place were PS2 launch titles Dead or Alive 2 Hardcore and Ridge Racer 5, which made for a nice solid 5-game launch when the dust finally settled. The launch of the PlayStation 2 took a lot out of me. The fact that I was now a part of the gaming media obligated me to acquire my systems from the get-go, but the implications of this particular launch scared the hell out of me, no matter how worthwhile it was. There would never be another calm, relaxing, sit back and enjoy it Dreamcast launch again. From PS2 on, launches were big events with bigger hype and truly asinine demand, or at least so I thought. I wasn't necessarily wrong about this, it just took a little longer to set in than I would have originally believed. Up next will be the following summer's Game Boy Advance launch, which was calm and relaxing, albeit in very unfortunate ways. If you like this video, then as always, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to help the channel out. Until next time, I'm Patrick Mifflin, sounding off.